Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Masters. I'm the managing editor of SC Magazine, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webcast, Take the Ransom Out of Ransomware, sponsored by Code 42. What distinguishes ransomware today are the brazen approaches attackers are using, along with the highly publicized payments that are being made, rather than a criminal conducting a traditional stealth attack that drains data later put up for sale to third parties on underground markets. Today's ransomware attack goes for the immediate payoff in Bitcoin or other digital currencies. IT security policies, anti-malware protection, and end users who lack the ability to recognize sophisticated scams make the impact from ransomware an inevitability. We have two presenters for you today. Guest speaker John Kindervag, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester, and Eric Sokol, Enterprise Systems Engineer at Code 42, who will be examining the prevalence of ransomware in the enterprise and will offer best practices for safeguarding your data against attackers. At Forrester, John Kindervag serves security and risk professionals. He's a leading expert on wireless security, network security, security information management, and PCI data security. At Code 42, Eric Sokol works with infrastructure and desktop engineering teams, helping them architect and implement modern endpoint data solutions. Just a note for you, we will have a Q&A following the presentations, so we invite you to send in any questions for John and Eric via the interface at any time. With that, welcome, gentlemen. We're pleased to have you with us today. John is going to get things started for us.
Hey, thanks so much, Greg, and thank you for joining me today to talk about ransomware and letting me share some of the ransomware best practices we've been researching at Forrester. So if we look at ransomware, Greg was exactly right. This is a new thing that's causing significant problems. If we look at just this one example, there was a hospital that got hit by ransomware and had no other choice but to pay $17,000 in Bitcoin in order to get past this, get their data back, get back functioning. Ransomware is a type of denial of service attack in that you can no longer function, but it's also an extortion attack. So it's very, very interesting when you look behind the scenes of ransomware. Now, if you want to learn more about ransomware, USCERT keeps track of various ransomware exploits, variants, the malware, all that kind of stuff. So they have a great resource out there. Lots of things you can read about ransomware, but we want to talk to you about some specific things that you can do today to solve this ransomware problem. And the first thing to understand is that ransomware is a business. It's a business model, and it's a very, very interesting and attractive business model. It is something that uses Bitcoin, or it could use other cyber currencies, but it doesn't really. Without Bitcoin, it would have been very difficult for ransomware to exist. And also, from a business standpoint, the people who do this help you understand what's going on. So you're going to learn a lot about technology if you get hit by ransomware. But let's look at the basics of ransomware and look at how it actually works in a simplified way, because sometimes these things can get overly complicated. But ransomware starts with an infection, and that infection can come from typically a phishing attack via email or a watering hole attack via a compromised website that downloads malware onto your system. It's still a malware-based attack. Secondly, there's generally command and control where an attacker sets up communication to the compromised device and does a key exchange and then uses that key, that cryptographic key, to encrypt the files or the media of the system. So they're leveraging cryptography. And then they're going to extort some money from you, and they're going to get you to send them some money via Bitcoin, and as a result, you'll get a decryption key that allows you to get your data back. So this is basically how ransomware works. And if you look at it, they're very customer-friendly things. So oddly enough, they're telling you what's happened. You've been encrypted by these big ciphers. Here's where you can learn about them. And you're going to have to get a private key, and here's how you do it. And if you can't get to it this way, here's how to download Thor. So they give you step-by-step instructions on how to pay them money. So this is a very interesting thing that they're very customer-centric, if you think of it that way, in a kind of macabre way. And they will help you understand things like Bitcoin. A lot of us haven't used Bitcoin, for example. And how do I do Bitcoin? Well, we're going to teach you how to do Bitcoin. So there's an educational process along with this. So you'll get something out of it, I guess. But if we look at best practices for mitigating ransomware, what we've found is that there's 5 essential problems that we can provide solutions for. And we're going to go through them here one by one so that you can see what's going on. But ultimately, ransomware exposes some problems and best practices that most companies should probably have already been done. So let's look at the first one. Malware leverages known vulnerabilities. And the solution to that is you need to integrate your vulnerability management and your patch management together more holistically. So if we look at the CVE database, Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures database, where all known vulnerabilities are tracked, you will find out that there are primarily 4 particular vulnerabilities that are used in all ransomware attacks. And they're vulnerabilities against either Silverlight or Flash. So you first have to understand the vulnerabilities that lead to ransomware. And then if you understand that, you can start to control those vulnerabilities more aggressively, and you can keep ransomware from exploiting your system, at least the ones that are known about today. And so what you want to do is what we call the prioritized patching process. You want to work with your vulnerability management vendor to figure out what are the known vulnerabilities around ransomware. You want to then scan your systems for those vulnerabilities, and then you want to prioritize those patches first so that you're patching the things that could lead to ransomware. And so we call this your P3, your prioritized patching process. The attack difficulty, how easy is it to come in? It comes in through phishing and drive-by, so it's pretty easy to get into you. The intrinsic risk, very high, and the data toxicity, this is all your data that works at. So the ransomware vulnerabilities are in the very, very highest P3 schedule that we have in this model. So once you've done that, you want to realize that this takes advantage of phishing and waterhole attacks. And phishing and waterhole attacks can be pretty much solved by email and web content security. One of the things that we hear a lot about related to phishing is, oh, people are doing bad things by clicking on those links. But what it exposes is that you have poor email or web content security, because this is something that can be dealt with technologically. Phishing is something that is very, very tricky, and it is very hard for the average user to determine whether or not they've been hit by a phishing attack. Here's one from PayPal, and it looks exactly like it came from PayPal. Here's one that looks like it came from Home Depot. very difficult to tell that that's not from Home Depot. And your average person, and even sometimes your very educated cybersecurity professionals, can't tell whether there's it's a phishing attack without some technology looking at the back end behind everything. So you have to do link analysis. You have to do a lot of different things. So if you don't have anti-phishing technology and anti-spam technology, this is something that you need to focus on. Same with watering hole attacks. Here's one that looks like a Forbes website. And Verizon's DBIR in 2015 said 16.6% of cyber espionage attacks were the result of web drive-by attacks. And what happens in a drive-by attack is you end up on this web page, whether it's a malicious link or whether it's typically a good web page that's been compromised with malware, sometimes for just a short period of time. You go there, and without you knowing, you get the malware downloaded on your system. You're driving by the website, and it just downloads that malware to your system without you interacting with the system at all, other than just going to the web page. And this is because of the way the modern web works, and there's a lot of execution of, say, JavaScript inside the browser on the client side that just is invisible to the end user. So watering hole attacks are very, very effective. So you need to focus on a comprehensive web and email content solution for protection. And so you need to provide effective anti-spam to your internal users. You need to categorize gray mail. Those are the emails that feel like spam to some people, but to other people they feel very much like they're something they want to see. You need to protect email employees from attachments containing malware. This would be run them through an anti-malware gateway, for example. You would need to use analytics to prevent phishing and other frauds. So your tooling has to have analytics to understand what's going on. And then you need to protect employees from malicious URLs. You can do this through web content filtering. You can do this with some DNS kinds of things. But there's lots of ways technologically you can solve this problem. But you have to look at it comprehensively. The next is malvertisements and downloaders. These are solved by improved endpoint protection. If you can install endpoint protection on your users' machines, this is very, very important to do if you have the ability to do it. Unfortunately, there's lots of different endpoints out there. It's not just a company-owned machine. It's your tablets, your mobile devices, your smartphones. All kinds of things out there are endpoints. So this endpoint discussion is very, very broad. And so the endpoint technology, it's critical, but you also have to maintain a transparent user experience. And one of the things that you might look at doing is application sandboxing, network segmentation to isolate some of this stuff. But you might want to reduce the number of browsers in the environment. Sometimes we have so many browsers that that some of them are more exploitable than others at any given time. You will want to look at USB device control software, and this is built into a lot of endpoint security suites. And you want to consider implementing endpoint backup as part of your technology solution. So then when we look at this other issue of malware transport, malware has to run across your network. So in order to solve this, you need to harden your network security. In a traditional architecture, it's easy for malware to be dropped onto your system. But in future networks, we can control that more easily by doing what we call using the zero trust model. So the zero trust model stops malware from moving because it's segmented, and it ends up being contained within the micro perimeter of the network. So look to Zero Trust to solve a lot of your network security problems. And then finally, one of the things that really is exposed by this kind of solution, this kind of, not solution I guess is the wrong word, but this kind of attack, is that we have a lack of effective backups. Your backup procedures are going to really, really be exposed by ransomware because ultimately if you have good backups, you don't have to pay the ransom. And the people who are paying ransom don't have good backups. I think there's just a reduced focus on backups right now because machines don't crash as much as they used to. So we've kind of taken the reliability and the availability of the devices for granted, and we're not focusing on backups, and we're not certainly focusing on clean backups. So we need to refocus our efforts on clean backups. And let's talk about what that means here, because this is critical, and this is why I'm ending my segment here on focusing on backups. You can save yourself a lot of money and a lot of hassle if you're doing your backups correctly. So when we think about backups, there's two things that I want you to think of in relation to ransomware. One is the frequency of backups. I need backups that happen very, very frequently. You have to ask yourself, how much data can you lose and still have your business to run? You know, is it 1 day? Is it 1 hour? Is it 1 minute? These are questions that you have to ask. And if you're doing good backups, you've asked this question already because it's part of your business resiliency efforts. But the other thing you need to think about that you have never had to think about really before is the cleanliness of your backup. One of the first things that malware is going to try to do is infect your backup systems so that the malware is embedded in the backup, so when you reinstall the data, the encryption in the malware happens again. And so this is something that you want to focus on, is how clean is it? I want to only back up clean data. And I need to have all these other things in place to make sure it's clean. So I need to have frequent backups, and I need to make sure that they're clean. Now, one of the big issues that we're seeing is the differences between endpoint backup and file sync and share. So file sync and share is a technology where, you know, it started out in the world of collaboration, and now it's part of a lot of suites. For example, Office 365 has a type of sync and share through Microsoft OneDrive that's very effective and very interesting. Same with Google Drive. It's very interesting, very effective for what it's used for, but too often we're using it as a backup solution. For example, me, I have my Microsoft Sync and Share working, my Google Drive working, but I also make frequent backups to multiple different places, external hard drives, flash drives, and then my own external private cloud that I built inside my house. So you want to realize that endpoint backup and file sync and share are while they're related somewhat, they're two different technologies, and having clean, frequent backups on your endpoints will enable you to combat ransomware. Okay, so let me just summarize some of the things from an anti-ransomware perspective. First, integrate vulnerability and patch management together. These are two sides of the same coin, and use that P3 process that I talked to you about to help you figure out which things are critical that you should do first. Second, focus on email and web content security. These are the two primary attack vectors. Third, we need to improve our endpoint protection and make sure that the endpoints are protected against this kind of malware. these are known malware attacks, so almost all endpoints should be able to protect against them. Harden your network security. Your network is the way that this malware traverses itself and gets to various endpoints anyway. So it doesn't magically appear. It has to move around the network. And then refocus your efforts on clean backups. And this is super important. Frequency and cleanliness. Think about those two things. Okay, there's my information. Follow me on Twitter. Love to engage with you in a conversation. And I'm going to turn it over to my friends at Code 42, and they're going to move on from here. And then I'll be staying around, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. Thanks much.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Sokol. I'm an enterprise system engineer, basically talking to companies all around that San Francisco Bay Area, helping them solve challenges, within their organizations around backup, data migrations, and everything like that. And also, a very hot topic these days is ransomware. So I want to give you some insights and some perspectives on the topic. And it starts with, ransomware in the corporate workplace. So how does it impact the corporate workplace? Well, 47% of businesses were hit last year. The challenge today is that it's almost impossible to really maintain a security posture to protect your organization. With malware that's constantly evolving, Kaspersky actually sent out a report that said that 2,900 new ransomware modifications were introduced in a span of just 3 months. So staying on top of that is really difficult in these days for sure. The other aspect is most of the ransomware incidents are coming through endpoints. So users using their laptops, desktops, trying to be productive. With that, keeping employees vigilant and prepared and to watch for phishing and other attack vectors is really very difficult. And basically estimated 91% of all phishing emails today contain ransomware. And that was from Phishing, a malware review. So one of our prospects, and I have conversations all the time, right before they purchase Code 42 Crash Plan, mentioned that the most common user that actually clicks on ransomware is their C-level executive. They basically said that they're too busy to stop to think, and they end up paying for ransomware every time. So something to consider. There are employees out there that you can't stay on top of that will make mistakes, which put your organization at risk. So there's a price to pay with ransomware. First off, as far as cost, 4 out of 10 companies pay the ransom. It's either because they don't have alternatives, because they're not prepared, they don't have solutions to protect them, or they have backup solutions or policies, but they really don't have much confidence in the tools or the people that they're actually forced to use them. And in that case, they just pay. From a time and resource perspective, 60% of a full day is basically spent on recovery. Basically, they're saying 9 hours on average is lost when someone is impacted with ransomware. And that impacts not only the employee and their productivity, your IT staff, and it takes away from their ability to do what they do on a daily basis, which is supporting the organization. And 1/3 basically of all those impacted lost revenue. And of that basically of all that population, 20% actually had to stop their business operations immediately because of the impact. So, ransomware is obviously lucrative for attackers, and 60% of business cases, attackers demand a ransom of $1,000 or more. 20% is actually $10,000 or more. So for the attacker, I recently read in a TrustWave security report that basically they're getting almost a 1,500% return on their investment. So yeah, they're going to do it. So you have to be prepared for it. So John talked a little bit about seek and share is being very different from backup, and I totally agree. The biggest thing is, seek and share provides very limited file versioning, and it's really poor at a large scale for data recovery, which really makes ransomware extremely painful for the company. And solutions, that keep limited versions, there actually now are many forms of ransomware that actually will quickly and repeatedly modify that file so that you use up all your versions and you're forced with no other option but to pay the ransom. And then, looking at even companies and products that have seek and share solutions, OneDrive, for example, if you read the fine print, actually Microsoft on OneDrive states that we do not guarantee that you'll be able to recover your data, and we recommend that your backups are kept in an external, non-mapped or synced storage. So, there's obviously a need for both solutions. Seek and share is great for collaborative efforts, but backup is critical to protect yourself from ransomware. And you kind of look at, an example of how map share drives can complicate, the recovery from ransomware. All it takes is one person being hit, right? They're going on to a map share where they're actually working on content that a lot of other people are as well. So they're not only impacting what's on their machine, but they're also impacting content that extends beyond them to their teams. And because today, the pain of tape, the pain of server infrastructure backup with file shares, it's not a priority to back them up on a regular basis. And that basically creates a larger window of data loss. So yeah, we can't recover that until the last backup. And that's usually not a great answer. It really impacts the users and potentially can impact the company and take it down. And then an admin has to basically undercode twice the cleanup, not only on the endpoint, but then also on the server to make sure that it's not spread, it's not impacting anything beyond what had already happened. So, everyone will continue to suffer, and that's just another reason to really focus on protecting your endpoint. So speaking of, backup, there's legacy endpoint backup solutions, tons of them out there, and, modern backup. So in general, you're looking at the legacy products, they're very intrusive, right? They prevent your employees from being productive, whether it's impacting other applications because it's using up too much of their CPU, or they're receiving pop-ups and it's just this naggy thing and it just annoys them. What they're going to end up doing is either interrupting, pausing it, or removing it altogether with admin rights. So that's something that, you must consider when you're looking at a backup solution. Also, John touched on the point of the frequency of backups. If the window is too large, it's not the best solution. What people are working on now is what's important to them, right? The time they're investing at their workstations, working on the most current and pressing project or file, whatever the content, if that is lost, having to reproduce that is going to take them just as much time. So having a product that does it continuously is key. And file size limitations. We're in a time where files are really rich in media, and they're just as critical, if not more critical, to those that are producing it. So there shouldn't be any limitation. There shouldn't be any caps. It should just work. And with legacy implementations, the challenge is, you can't always get a restore. And the reason for that is not necessarily the product doesn't work, but the complexity of the implementation, especially as they get larger, more complex across multiple regions. They're very difficult to manage and maintain. So the maintenance is not they're on top of maintenance as far as an IT perspective. It's hard to verify that are the clients backing up, and is the restore going to work? And it creates risk, right, for your organization. So you want something that's simple, integrated, seamless, and preferably cloud, just so you don't have to worry about maintaining infrastructure. So, Code for Each Crash Plan helps you recover fast. You'll never have to pay. The reason we're able to do that is, we're solving, the continuous backup, right? You're going to get every 15 minutes or more frequently, however you want to set it up, the ability to automatically just back up those duplicated blocks of data that maybe have changed since the last backup. So you're always protected. And it works on all platforms. Unlimited file versions, unless you wanted to set any sort of limitation for retention, you can back up all versions, unlimited, which is great for employees that need to go back and recover something that they may have deleted or overwritten, which is limited on a sync and share solution. No limits on file size, and point-in-time data recovery. Let's go back on the calendar and restore something from a certain day and time. It's as easy as that. And with the product allowing for streamlined device replacements for data migrations, for tech refresh, making it simple as re-image a system, the new system, hand it to the user, they log in, and now they can restore their data and move on with their way. Downloading the more critical stuff that they need to work on right now so they can get started, and letting the rest come down afterwards. So, it solves the challenge of protecting your endpoints, but also providing a solution that makes it more than just a backup, right? It makes it a tool that enhances productivity for the users. So, like these customers, you can have the peace of mind yourself, by proactively protecting your employee endpoint data with Code for Each Crash Plan. Simply, as one person states, worrying about fighting ransomware is a thing of the past. We just rebuild and restore. Simple as re-image the system and restore the data and get on your way. Instead of focusing and putting all your energy to prevent ransomware, which is bound to get into your organization as it's getting more and more advanced, that's a very important part of it. But at the same time, you need to have the security of knowing that if it does happen, that you have Plan B. And modern endpoint backup is the way to do it. And you look at the cost. So the average ransom payment today is suspected to be around $679. 1 year of Code for Each Crash Plan Premium, unlimited data in our cloud is $110. At that price, if you're using some sort of legacy backup solution, what you're paying as far as infrastructure, power, resources, and support probably goes far beyond the price of $110 per user per year. So something to consider, whether A, you're taking a risk by not having a true modern backup solution, but B, you're also missing out on an opportunity to enable other functionality and features by leveraging that data that you're backing up with a product like Code for Each Crash Plan. modern endpoint backup basically saves the day for a ransomware situation. It safeguards the data and neutralizes the attack. Users can restore all their data and get back to work. It's as simple as that. But at the same time, it becomes an extensible way of, protecting your infrastructure and your data with security. And some of the examples for that, we talked about ransomware. With copies of your company data securely protected, you can recover from malware fast and never have to pay the ransomer. From an insider threat perspective, protecting your corporate IP, an example of a departing employee, right? If you start seeing unusual activity of large data transfers to third-party clouds or USB thumb drives with data getting transferred onto them from devices, this is a product that's built into, or a feature that's built into Privilege Crash Plan, where you can get notified, right? You can get alerted if something is suspicious or unusual, and you can also track down exactly what was transferred, restore that file, and prove, and also capture the serial number of the device that's plugged in to prove in litigation that IP was taken inappropriately. And in the result of a breach, right, you can quickly respond to data incidents. Knowing what existed on a compromised system or a lost laptop lets you really reduce the risk of non-compliance and fines. And we kind of touched on device migrations. With basically a wizard that is built into Crash Plan on the client, your end users can actually do their own device replacements and get back to work. That means less IT resource time of, in the back of the house, data migrations, and focusing that energy somewhere else. Really easy to use. And then, really critical is speed and simplicity of legal holds, right? We have an integrated web app that basically gives the ability to preserve in-place legal holds without disrupting the employees or IT staff. So, yeah, we in a sense laugh at ransomware because, we're prepared, right? Our product works, able to restore, and what we found is that 22% of organizations made modern endpoint backup mandatory after all employees, for all employees after a malware or ransomware attack. So people see the value in modern backup solution, but it's better to be prepared in advance than have to do something afterwards after paying the ransom. So in ending, it's important to be certain, and the only way to be certain is to have a way that you're protecting your endpoints regularly, continuously, and knowing that data can be restored quickly and your employees can be back to work in an event of ransomware. And if you'd like to find out a little bit more about modern endpoint backup or Privilege Crash Plan, check out the URL that I have at the bottom of the slide. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Arik, and thank you, John, for your presentations. We have a number of questions that have already come in from our audience, so maybe we can move over to that. You guys ready to field some questions?
Sure.
Got you both back on the line? Okay. Here's the first one for you. Okay, thanks, John. There's a stat floating around that new malware is created at a rate of nearly 12 exploits per second, or 1 million a day. Does it make sense to spend so much time and money on prevention, or should we shift our focus to prepare for recovery when the inevitable happens? Who wants to field that one?
Well, I don't know
that one.
Yeah, I mean, real quick, it's not a binary decision. That's why we gave you those 5 steps. There's no single silver bullet. You want to be able to recover. You want to be able to prevent. So, but recovery is key. That's certainly a big portion of it, and people aren't focusing on that very much.
Yeah, true, and I agree with that. You know, a lot of people are deferring to thinking share solutions or status quo of relying on employee policy of put your files on the file share and things like that, and trying to avoid the backup as an additional solution. But in the end, I mean, the only guaranteed certainty is by having something that works and is protecting those devices in that event that it does happen.
Okay, thanks. Here's a second one for you. There seems to be a lot of blaming the victim going on when it comes to ransomware. Our company fired an employee who released payroll records to someone she thought was her new boss and CFO. Does more employee training work to reduce ransomware?
Mark, why don't you start?
Yeah, I'll take this one. You know, I come from big corporate enterprises. I actually worked for, you know, a big biotech company and a big software company as well before joining Code 42. And, you know, there was a lot of training, a lot of time and focus, testing your posture by, you know, sending emails to employees, testing out, you know, whether or not people are bad surfing and making sure that people are trained to do the right thing. And just making them aware. And I think, you know, I think it is critical to train and really keep up on that, because it's sort of a mindset and preparedness step. And in the end, it's going to really reduce a lot of potential impact to your company, because there's no way that you can stay on top of, you know, they were saying, I learned recently that instead of like 0-day patching, it's like 0-second patching, and things are moving, evolving so quickly that you need to be prepared not only from training your employees and having them be aware of the risk and how to avoid it, but also making sure you have the right infrastructure tools and security to protect yourself when they don't.
John, did you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, these things are so complicated that we can't blame the victims, and we don't blame the victims in other places. If a building falls in on you, we don't blame the victim. We blame the architect. We blame the engineering firm. We blame the people who built it. So blaming the victims is not useful, and quite frankly, I don't think there's any reasonable data that shows that trying to solve this problem by teaching employees not to click on things is very valuable. It's much more effective to spend your money on preventative or recovery techniques.
Okay, thanks guys. Here's the third question. Are you hearing more discussion about the ability to recognize and respond to threats, or are companies holding firm with the idea they can prevent threats? That is, are IT departments starting with a plan for when it hits rather than hoping they can defend against it?
Well, I mean, you certainly have to have a plan, right? And I have a joke where I talk about most people use hope as their risk mitigation strategy. Put our head in the sand. Oh, that's not going to be a problem. Obfuscate reality. Oh, it's not a big deal. Point the finger at somebody else. It's the employee's problem for clicking on the link. And then the E stands for start your employment journey, because you're going to get fired because you weren't thinking of it in the right way. So, I mean, hoping that it doesn't happen to you has never been an effective strategy.
Okay. Arik, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And yeah, you got to be prepared. And you know, unfortunately, a lot of organizations are waiting until something happens before they actually come up with the plan. But I see this changing. I'm seeing people are getting a little bit more proactive in helping prevent that.
Okay, thank you. Here's the fourth one. If businesses took care to have clean, up-to-the-minute backup on every device, wouldn't the gravy train for ransomers dry up? Why aren't companies flocking to the cloud to assure they've got a backup? And a follow-up, why is redundancy as a security strategy so low on the totem pole when it comes to sexy, in quotes, IT?
Yeah, the term sexy, that's a term you never use with backup, and that's why it's not a priority for most organizations. It's not the cool new tool that does some crazy thing. It does something that's critical, and it works, and it works in getting out of the toughest situations as far as preventing data loss, preventing ransom. Yeah, but it's funny that the mentality just for backup is just not a priority in the sense that it's not so cool as other things. John, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, not much of this is sexy. This is just basic blocking and tackling of security. So that's what's amazed me about it as I've looked at the problem, is that it's really exposing flaws. It's taking, ransomware is taking, the curtain away and exposing that there's some significant problems in basic things that we should be doing. Some people call that the basic hygiene of security. I don't know that hygiene is the great word, but it doesn't have to be sexy. It doesn't even have to be expensive. It just has to be done.
Okay, very good. And unfortunately, that'll have to be it for this session. If we didn't get to your questions, our presenters will follow up with you, and we'll certainly resolve that. Let me thank our presenters today, Forrester's John Kindervag and Code 42's RX Sokol, for sharing their insight and expertise today, and of course our thanks to all of you for tuning in. This webcast will be available on demand beginning tomorrow on the SC Magazine website under the Events tab. For SC Magazine, this is Greg Masters saying good day, everyone.